Number 8. Celina Powell. Celina Powell became famous, or perhaps infamous, as a rap superfan and for allegedly dating well-known rappers. She captured widespread attention with her YouTube channel, where she discussed her trysts and made some shocking allegations against various rappers, including claiming that Snoop Dogg cheated on his wife with her. Powell also claimed that the musician Offset got her pregnant during an affair, and that Trey Songz committed disturbing acts of misconduct against her. She also dated the recently deceased singer Aaron Carter, and said that Drake changed his number after she bombarded him with unwanted nude photos. Many of Celina's claims have been disproven, but some remain questionable. The controversial social media star, who's originally from Denver, had her first major brush with the law in 2015 when she was accused of driving a getaway car after a robbery. She continued to rack up warrants and charges over the following years for numerous alleged crimes, including shoplifting, evading police, traffic offenses, and repeatedly violating probation. By 2018, Powell had outstanding bonds totaling $61,000. Right before the 2019 New Year, she was nabbed by a bounty hunter in Aurora, Colorado. In 2022, she was sentenced to 2 years in prison for failing to comply with the terms of her probation, which included court-mandated drug and alcohol tests. In the meantime, the rap gossip grapevine has one less chronic meddler to worry about. Number 7. Wisdom Awute. One night in May 2021, 2 people were seriously injured in a shooting in Miami Beach. Police reported to the scene shortly before midnight on Ocean Drive, a famous street known for its Art Deco hotels. Near a restaurant, they found 2 victims, one with a gunshot wound to the shoulder and the other who was shot in the leg. They were rushed to a nearby hospital. One victim was treated and released, while the other was paralyzed and remained hospitalized in critical condition. Officers arrested 29-year-old Christopher Urena and 21-year-old rapper Wisdom Awute, who's a member of DaBaby's billion-dollar baby entertainment label. DaBaby was detained for questioning regarding the incident, but was released a day later with no charges against him. Urena and Awute were both accused of pulling a gun and shooting at the victims. They were charged with attempted first-degree murder with a deadly weapon and aggravated assault, and Urena faced additional charges of grand theft and being a felon in possession of a weapon. The outcome of the case is unclear, and the trouble didn't end there. In 2022, DaBaby and Wisdom reportedly got into a fistfight backstage during a concert. Footage of the incident shows DaBaby throwing the first punch. Wisdom immediately fought back, but a security guard quickly intervened and broke up the brawl. It's unclear what led up to the fight, or if it affected DaBaby and Wisdom's business relationship. Number 6. Chantal Callaway. Back in the early 2000s, Chantal Callaway was known as a party girl from Atlanta who regularly turned up at major celebrity parties and events throughout the South. She made a name for herself during the MySpace days, when she posted photos of herself with musicians like John Legend and Kid Capri on her profile, as well as NBA players including Gary Payton and Paul Pierce. Callaway was also an avid Twitter user who described herself in her bio as an event planner and marketing genius. But her days became much less carefree in 2011 when she was accused of robbing a bank. According to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, Callaway allegedly entered an Atlanta area financial institution in disguise and handed the teller a note demanding cash. A responding officer reportedly saw her leave the scene and detained her, at which point she was no longer wearing her disguise. In the meantime, police recovered the disguise with the help of a canine unit. After squaring away her legal troubles, Chantal refocused her energy away from the celebrity scene and pursued her dream of becoming an entrepreneur. She created a game called Rhyme Antics, which is described on its website as a hilarious rhyming vocabulary game inspired by hip-hop. Designed for players aged 12 and up, the rules require participants to freestyle in proper English using any of 12,000 different vocabulary terms, including words that are used on the SAT college admissions test. Callaway told Black Enterprise that she and her family were tired of playing conventional vocabulary games like Catchphrase and Taboo. She said that her mission was to promote literacy at a time when there's a literacy crisis in the US that isn't being talked about, which seems infinitely more fulfilling than partying with famous people. Number 5. Lori Maddox. Some of the most iconic musicians of all time reached the height of their fame in the 1970s. A woman named Lori Maddox, also known as Lori Maddox, would later claim that during that time she had affairs with David Bowie, Led Zeppelin guitarist Jimmy Page, Rolling Stones frontman Mick Jagger, and various other celebrities. Based on her timeline, this would mean that she was just a teenager during her involvement with all three men. The so-called baby groupie began frequenting clubs along West Hollywood Sunset Strip just months before she allegedly began dating Jimmy Page. Maddox claimed that Led Zeppelin's manager basically kidnapped her and snuck her to Page's hotel room, and that Page went to great lengths to conceal the relationship due to her age. She said she broke up with him a few years later after catching him in bed with a Playboy model. But if everything Maddox says is true, then she also wasn't exactly faithful during her relationship with Page, because she supposedly began seeing David Bowie just a year after she met Page. This, along with her contradictory stories about losing her virginity to both Bowie and Page, are among the reasons that some of her claims have been called into question. Maddox's account of her relationship with Page is generally accepted as true, but her connections to Bowie and Jagger are disputed. She claimed that she met Jagger in 1975 during a joint recording session with three members of the Beatles, but by then, the Beatles were long broken up, and the last known recording session between former band members had taken place the year before. Maddox's authenticity is questionable, but she had a verified presence on the celebrity scene as a young woman, and there seems to be at least a grain of truth to her stories, which highlight the era's culture and attitude toward inappropriate relationships between major celebrities and underage groupies. Number 4. Chiwasu. David Bowie was performing in Rochester, New York in 1976 when a breathtaking young woman in the front row named Chiwasu caught his eye. He slipped her a handwritten note inviting her to his after-party, and she obliged. Soon, Chiwasu and two other attractive women were rubbing elbows with Bowie and fellow rock icon Iggy Pop in Bowie's private hotel suite. From the sound of it, the hosts cut no corners when it came to party favors and extracurricular activities, but the festivities were cut short when someone called Bowie and told him that his wife was missing and his son was sick. He soon realized that it was a prank call, but things continued to go downhill from there. Little did anyone at the gathering know, two of the attendees were undercover police officers. They were working the party as part of a sting after local law enforcement received a tip that Bowie had cocaine. A vice squad stationed in the room next door was listening to the group's conversations. Someone in Bowie's entourage asked one of the undercovers if they knew where to score some marijuana. Just a moment later, police stormed into the room and arrested Bowie, Iggy Pop, Sue, and Bowie's bodyguards. They weren't in jail for long. Bowie paid everyone's bail and soon moved on to his next scheduled tour stop. If convicted of the charges, the defendants could have faced up to 15 years in prison. Luckily, a grand jury dropped all 4 cases, sparing everyone involved from any time behind bars. Sue and Bowie never spoke again, and Bowie never returned to Rochester. In response to false allegations that she was a snitch behind the arrest, Sue told a local reporter that people had the wrong idea about her. She stayed famously silent about the incident after that. Sue went on to open a beauty salon in Brighton, New York that she still owns today. When she finally opened up about the arrest more than 40 years later in 2017, she told filmmaker Matt Ehlers that she gave Bowie her traditional Chinese wedding blanket at their arraignment, and that she thinks she may have inspired his hit song China Girl. Number 3. Brittany Harris. During the America's Most Wanted Hip-Hop Festival in West Palm Beach, Florida in 2013, an employee found 2 unsupervised young children standing in the parking lot together, surrounded by drunk concert goers. 2 hours later, the worker noticed that the kids were still alone and approached them. They reportedly told him that their mom left them in the car while she attended the concert. The children were turned over to the sheriff's deputies, who located their mother, 25-year-old hip-hop model Brittany Harris, at the end of the show. Harris, also known as Pretty Red, initially claimed that her cousin brought the kids to the venue, according to an arrest report, but she allegedly eventually admitted that she left them in the parking lot while she attended the event. Some news sources reported that she ditched her kids to take advantage of some backstage passes to meet Lil Wayne, but it's unclear whether these claims are true. Harris was charged with 2 counts of child neglect. While the outcome of the case is unclear, she appears to have moved past her legal troubles and is now a registered nurse with a social media following of about 120,000 people, making her a small-time celebrity in her own right. Number 2. Kathy Smith. Canadian-born rock groupie Kathy Smith landed her first big break in the 1970s as a backup singer for Gordon Lightfoot. She was also his mistress, and the relationship between the two was volatile, to say the least. At one point, Lightfoot even fired his opening act for allegedly flirting with Smith. She was also mentioned in the paperwork when Lightfoot and his wife split in what became one of the most expensive divorces in Canadian history. After leaving her gig with Lightfoot in 1976, Smith went to work for various other musicians and celebrities, during which time she developed an addiction to heroin. As her habit worsened, she became a drug dealer who catered to the rich and famous, including Rolling Stone members Ron Wood and Keith Richards. After moving to Los Angeles, Smith reconnected with Saturday Night Live cast member John Belushi, whom she had met during a previous performance on the show. Except this time, Belushi was more interested in the drugs she was selling than her singing talent. In 1982, he was found dead from what appeared to be an accidental drug overdose. The details surrounding Belushi's death remained obscure until several months later, when Smith allegedly admitted to the National Enquirer that she administered the fatal injection. In the days leading up to Belushi's death, he and Smith went on a drug binge. During that time, Smith injected Belushi multiple times with a combination of heroin and cocaine, commonly known as a speedball. She later denied killing Belushi, but ultimately pled no contest to involuntary manslaughter and received a 3-year sentence. After serving 15 months, Smith was deported back to Canada, where she worked as a legal secretary and kept a low profile until her death in 2020 at the age of 73. Number 1. Cape Cookies. Starting in the late 1950s, the US and the Soviet Union became entangled in a frenzied competition for superiority in outer space. Known as the space race, the era saw unprecedented space travel as the two nations vied to be the first to achieve major milestones, including putting a man on the moon. The astronauts who participated in these historic missions became major celebrities. They attracted huge followings of starstruck young women who fawned over them, essentially giving them rock star status. Nicknamed Cape Cookies, some of these superfans were quick to take up on the chance to get lucky with strapping space travelers, most of whom were married. Consequently, infidelity was rife among the ranks of NASA's most famous employees. After all, the human race doesn't exactly have a good track record for resisting temptation. Only 7 out of the 30 astronauts' marriages survived the 60s, and while it takes 2 to tango, one can only imagine, or at least hope, that at least some of the mistresses felt a tinge of regret after coming to their senses and realizing that they were a willing party to a trend that caused pain to a lot of families. In today's world, being busted for having an affair leads to plenty of divorces, but it doesn't necessarily ruin someone's career. It was a much different story 50 or 60 years ago, especially when it came to NASA, which expected its employees to uphold a public image according to the standards and respectability that defined the era. Divorce was heavily frowned upon and could easily cost an astronaut their job, regardless of the circumstances. At the time, women also had far fewer options for supporting themselves as they do now. For these reasons, many wives were pressured into staying with their unfaithful astronaut husbands longer than they wanted to, for the sake of the family breadwinner keeping his job. Along with their reluctance to pursue a divorce, they suffered silently, keeping their husbands' dirty secrets on the low while projecting a public image of the perfect all-American wife and mother. In that sense, NASA's no-nonsense policy had the unintended effect of prolonging toxic marriages rather than discouraging astronauts from cheating on their spouses. And it's probably safe to assume that some of the Cape Cookies who had affairs with married astronauts endured painful consequences of their own, including perhaps being labeled as a homewrecker. Thanks for watching. Would you rather appear in national tabloids as a wannabe celebrity who follows famous people around like a lost puppy dog? Or be forced to move away from your loved ones due to small-town rumors, but given the opportunity to start over in a new place where nobody knows who you are? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe. See you next time. Bye!